you turn the AC on and you start hitting the gas and you just hear real loud. It's like, what did I do? Would you run a ground from the rear battery to the front, then to the alternator to make a proper ground loop? Also, Big Jeff Trolley number 3 is still a circle. You know what? That's funny because I do have that right here on the fourth thing that I wanted to go over is ground loops. Whenever you add something to the back of your vehicle and you're changing the ground location, pretty much, of where the current is flowing. Like I was telling you guys earlier, the current flows from positive to negative in a car. Like the current, not the electrons. That's different. We're keeping it simple because that's really how it works. Whatever. So whenever you're having it go from the front of the car to the back of the car, that's whenever you can run into issues with the ground. Now, I know people have told me before, you know, oh, don't ground a chassis, make a ground from front to back, like he was saying here. And that can help, but it's not an end all be all. Because the reason why that you have ground loop noise is because of the ground potential differences in the vehicle when the alternator is on. When the alternator is not on, it does not change the ground potential. There's no current from the AC ripple, DC ripple, whatever, the ripple of the alternator, of how it makes power. And with the switching turns, whatever, with the 6-phase or 3-phase, 6 diodes, and just makes it a DC line of power for your car. That's how it works. It's just like an AC generator, vice versa, takes it to the DC. There's your power. So when it does that, there's a little ripple on the bottom like that. That is what you're hearing with the ground loop noise. So whenever you add something in the back and you're changing that ground back there to the front, because you're going to have voltage drop between the front of the car and the rear of the car. And that voltage drop difference is going to be the difference of the ground potential as well, because that's traveling through the car and then back if you're doing a ground dedicated front to back rather than just using the chassis. Long story short, that's why you can get ground loop noise. Everybody hates that. Ground loop noise is, God, it's the worst thing. You turn on your new setup, you start driving down a car, you turn the AC on and you start hitting the gas and you just hear real loud. It's like, what did I do? What did I do? So when you're adding that second battery in the back, there's a few things that I can tell you to try to help not have that happen. Because just because you run a 0 gauge wire front to back and it's safe, you don't ground in the back of the car, and you're just trying to bring the ground to the front, there can still be differences and there can still be that noise. It's not an end all be all to get rid of that when you're adding that second battery in the back of the car. So yes, you can ground a chassis. It's not a bad thing to ground to the chassis, you know, and people might say, oh, it's only good for this amount of current. That's really not the problem. It's a really big conductor is the problem. Your whole car is metal. Think of it like that. And whenever you have your taillights, your headlights, your everything playing connected to your chassis, and you got power going to the back of your car, and that ground is returning back from the chassis to the alternator's ground that is making that power, that is what makes the noise. Whenever you have your RCAs laying down on the ground by your chassis, yes, it can be from the power wires running parallel, and to eliminate that, you would need a whole ton of insulation around the power wire to help it, and it still wouldn't fix it. You got to keep it far away, but that's not even the biggest problem. And I've come to this too, and I'm going to look at some of my systems too, because I got a little bit of whine in the Pilot, and it's because the RCAs are laying on the chassis, and I'm ground to the chassis. That is something to think about when you're adding a second battery and running your wires to do all this with any setup, is to eliminate that ground noise. Don't have your RCAs laying on the chassis if you're grounded to the chassis, because that current is literally coming back through the chassis, passing by those RCA wires, and those RCA wires are actually picking up that ripple. They're picking up the ripple from the ground potential difference. And that's crazy, man. There's people say so much stuff, and this book teaches you so much. And I could go deep rabbit holes with just ground loops and stuff, but it definitely fell into tonight's topic because of when you're doing this, what do? Do you ground at the chassis? Do you have a dedicated ground? Cookie Monster, I got now a dedicated ground going front to back, and I'm also grounding the back of the car. Obviously, current's going to go it's going to travel the way of least resistance, and that's just how it works. But you know, I don't know, man. Ever since I did that, I had the tiniest bit of alternator whine, and now it's gone. So that might be because of that, where I have, you know, big zero gauge going through, and that potential difference is less, so it's less noticeable. And that is the key with that, is the ground loop noise, that AC ripple from the alternator supplying power to your car to charge your batteries. That is alternator whine. And it's just, it's truly nuts. Catch the Livin Loud with Andy show every Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 or 10 o'clock Eastern. Smash the like and subscribe.